So, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is about what if Izuku were Viltrumite, the invincible hero, part 1. But before I start, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And check out the description box to support the original author. Now, let's start the story. Hisashi cleared those thoughts out of his head as he descended towards his apartment. He took a moment to check himself in the window. His mustache and goatee were immaculate, just like his clothes. If he was coming home to one of the most beautiful women in the world, it made sense for him to look just as good. Opening the door, the sight that greeted him was his wife tearfully sitting at the kitchen table. Hisashi immediately stiffened. "Inko? What is it? Didn't you get my messages, Hisashi?" Hisashi tried his best not to fold under her question. "I was under the Pacific Ocean. There was a giant squid causing trouble for the fishermen and no one else was able to deal with it." Inko sighed. "Right, I should have assumed you were working. It's just I." "Inko," Hisashi warmly said as he tossed his cape on the couch and warmly held his wife's hand. "What happened?" Inko sighed. "I took Izuku to the doctor today." Hisashi kept his face neutral as he pressed on. "What did he say?" "He said that Izuku won't receive a quirk. At this point, the chances of him getting one are almost zero. And he isn't taking it very well." "What do you mean? What is he doing?" "He was crying on the way home and now he's just in his room. I don't know what to say to him." Hisashi smirked. "He's crying? Seriously?" "Hisashi." Inko chastised her husband. "Don't say it like that. He's upset enough as it is. Izuku's upset that he might never become a hero now." Hisashi frowned when he heard that. It was true that the doctor didn't know the full truth about Izuku, so he couldn't necessarily blame him for doing his job. "I'll talk to him." "Hisashi. I need to tell him the truth. Once he knows what he is, he won't be upset by this anymore." "I thought you wanted to wait." Hisashi sighed. "That was my original plan. But you don't want to see Izuku upset and quite frankly neither do I. Telling him the truth will be the best way to cheer him up." Before Inko could stop him, Hisashi had already opened the door and entered his son's room. Closing the door behind him, Hisashi saw Izuku sitting down on his bed. His eyes were red and puffy. Sighing, Hisashi sat down next to his son. "Your mother told me what happened. Are you alright, son?" Izuku shook his head. "I have the bone. I'm quirkless. I can't be a hero anymore." Hisashi didn't understand the bone part, but that might have something to do with biological differences. His son wasn't entirely human, after all. Which, as a matter of fact, was something he should now clear up. "Now who said you couldn't be a hero?" Izuku looked up at his father with confusion. "Huh? What do you mean?" "Izuku, you may have noticed that I'm not like other dads. I think it's time I told you why." Izuku cleared the tears from his eyes. "You mean why your quirk is so different?" "Sort of. You see, I don't actually have a quirk." "What? But that doesn't make sense. I've seen you do so many things." "That's true. And the reason I can do all those things is because of where I was born." Izuku frowned. His father had told him that he wasn't born in Japan. But he never said anything beyond that. "Where are you from?" Hisashi smiled. "Millions of light years from here. I was born on a planet called Viltrum." Izuku's eyes widened. "Viltrum?" "Yes. It's a planet that rests in a solar system very similar to Earth's. Viltrumites even look very similar to humans. Except for our abilities." Izuku was starting to understand the path his father was leaving. "Your powers are something you're born with." "Exactly. I knew you were smart," Hisashi said with a back pat. "Viltrumites all have great strength and speed. And one of us can fly." "All of them?" "Yes. And that includes you, Izuku. Don't forget, you're half Viltrumite. And we have something called dominant genes." "Dominant genes?" "It means that if we have offspring with another species, the resulting child will become more Viltrumite over time. It's why I'm not surprised that you didn't get your mother's power. It just means that you'll have to wait a while before you get mine." The moment he heard those words, Izuku immediately lit up. His previous gloom washed away by excitement. "You mean I'll be strong like you? And I'll be able to fly?" "Without a doubt. There were some late bloomers on Viltrum. But don't worry. Once your powers kick in, I'll make sure you know how to use them properly." Hisashi hugged his son's shoulder to move him closer. "You and me, son. We'll be the most powerful duo on this planet." Izuku's smile was infectious as he wrapped his own arms around his father's waist. Hisashi, a man who didn't often show emotion, was delighted by the display. It helped solidify Izuku's loyalty and connection to him. And Hisashi knew that when the day came, he and Izuku would bring glory to the empire. Izuku woke up hoping to be floating out of his bed. He was disappointed when he felt his pillow on his head. Just like yesterday. And every day for the past decade. The day is still not the day. Izuku remembered the talk he had with his father all those years ago, back when he was 4. It had been a decade since then, and he still hadn't developed his powers. Lifting himself out of bed, Izuku put on some clothes and walked out towards the kitchen. His mother was alone making breakfast. "Hi, Mom. Where's Dad?" Inko turned to see her son. "Good morning, Izuku. Your father is in Greece, I think. Something about a sea monster." That made sense. When normal heroes couldn't handle an issue or were too focused on civilians, calling Omni-Man was a good way to deal with problems. And if he thought it was worth his time, Omni-Man wouldn't hesitate to come help. "Do you know what time he'll be back?" "It's hard to tell sometimes," Inko said as she steamed both the rice and vegetables at the same time. "He might make it back before you leave." "I wouldn't." Knock knock. It was at that moment that Hisashi, wearing his red and navy blue costume, walked through the front door. His hair and his cape were still wet. "I hope I'm not late." The Kraken was a little more difficult to deal with than I expected. I swear Earth has a problem with sea monsters. Every few months I'm fighting a new one. "It wasn't too hard for you, right Dad?" Izuku asked, his eyes burning with curiosity and admiration. An admiration that earned a smile from Hisashi. "Not at all. I just had to find the right spot to punch. It was incredibly easy after that." Now, I don't want to hear about sea monster fights at the breakfast table," Inko said, interrupting them both. "You can discuss your little adventures later. Izuku has school today, and you have work to do, Hisashi. You should both eat up." "Actually, I'm going to need a shower. Sea monsters leave a bad smell." "Not so fast," Inko said as she dropped Izuku's plate in front of him and went to her husband. "Come here." Izuku couldn't see them kissing, but he could hear the smooching and moaning. It was an awkward place to be. "I can go to school without eating. I don't think I would mind doing that." "Really? Don't be so childish, Izuku. Most kids would be happy to see their parents being together." "Not that close," Izuku muttered in response. He quickly drank the rest of his soup, along with chewing the rice and vegetables. "I'm heading out to school now. I'll be back later." "Hold up, Izuku," Hisashi said as he turned his body to face his son. "I noticed your shoulders slump. I keep telling you not to worry." Rather than being cheered up, Izuku was just upset that his father noticed. He didn't want to make a big deal of that fact. "It's fine, Dad. I'm alright. I've told you. Even the latest bloomers on Viltrum would get their powers before what would be their 18th birthday. Mixed race or not. We just have to be patient. They should be due any day now." Izuku nodded half-heartedly. "I understand, Dad. I'll keep waiting. I'll see you after school." Inko turned her husband to face her. "Hisashi, you shouldn't get his hopes up like that. You saw how disappointed he was when he didn't get a quirk. Do you want to put him through that again?" "Inko, I'm not trying to set him up for anything. What I said was true, beings with even a quarter of Viltrumite blood will gain our powers. Some just get them later than others. I'm sure Izuku will get his abilities any day now." Inko sighed. She had her own reservations about her husband's words, but she kept them to herself. "Let's just hope you are right. I don't like seeing our son upset." "Neither do I, Inko. Don't worry. I'm sure things will be fine." As Inko went to prepare her own breakfast, Hisashi eyed the door his son left. His eyes were narrowed. Izuku never had any luck making friends. Since he didn't get a quirk at 4 years old like everyone else, he was left as the quirkless nobody no one wanted to associate with. The last time he had friends was when he was 5. Back when Kaken was at least willing to keep him around. Before the incident at the lake. Izuku tried to push down his feelings as he sat down in his seat and pulled out his notebook. He opened up to the last page he had been working on. The one that focused on one of the newest heroes so far. Kamui Woods. His quirk is his wooden body. He can control and adapt his body to different situations. Being wood, he is weak against fire. But I wonder. Shut it, nerd. I don't want to start my day listening to your shitty mumbling. Izuku immediately shut up and tensed up when he heard that voice. He looked up to see the red-eyed spiky-haired blonde boy glaring at him. "Oh. Sorry, Kaken. I didn't realize I was muttering. I'll try to." "I said shut up, nerd. Keep making noise and I'll blow up your face." Bakugo lifted his hand and created sparks of explosions to emphasize his point, which prompted Izuku to quickly close his mouth. Even with other students in the class, no one did a thing to help Izuku. They were all busy either focusing on their own quirks, talking to each other, or they were just straight up ignoring him. Even Bakugo was ignoring him now, sitting back while others praise him. "Alright. Everybody quiet down. Get to your seat so we can begin class." It takes a while, but everyone does eventually sit down in their spots. Once they do, the teacher brings out a stack of papers from his briefcase. "So the school wants me to tell you about this now, since graduation is only a few months away now. All of you will have a choice after middle school if you want to pursue higher education or join the workforce. What these forms are for is." The teacher gave up halfway through his sentence and tossed the papers away. "Ah, who am I kidding? You're all going to try out for UA, aren't you?" The class erupted into confirmational cheers after that. Every single person in the room used their quirks to display their excitement. The kid with a wooden plank for a face kept nodding it up and down. The kid with detachable eyeballs held them in his hand. The girl with fingers made of confetti kept throwing a lot of it out. And all Izuku could do was silently hold up his hand. Closer to him, Bakugo was chuckling. "Do me a favor, teach. Don't lump me in with these losers. I'm the only one who going to make it into UA. Not stuck at the bottom like the rest of these rejects." The class quieted down once Bakugo made his own impromptu announcement. Most of them were annoyed. "How do you get off saying that? We have a chance too. That's really uncalled for." Bakugo took their complaints as a challenge. One that he laughed at. "You extras should just shut up like the rejects you are. The best you'll ever be are mentions in my story." Bakugo stood up on his desk to make himself more imposing. And to literally stand on his pedestal. "I already aced the mock test. I'm the only person here with a shot to make it. And I'll definitely be the best hero there ever was. I'll surpass even All Might. Even Omni-Man will." "Oh, yes. It seems Midoriya also applied to UA." The room became deathly silent after that piece of information was let out. Creepily, silently, every pair of eyes in the room turned to Izuku. And every person abruptly exploded into laughter. "Midoriya? Really? He can't get in just by studying. Fanboying isn't a quirk, you know. There's no way they'd take a quirkless kid." I'm not quirkless." Izuku tried to explain himself. But his anxiety along with the constant cheers made thinking harder than usual for him. And there are no rules against quirkless anymore. I could still. Boom. AHH. Izuku jumped out of his chair just as his desk got blown up. Bakugo was standing over him with a smoking hand. "Deku, have you forgotten what you are? You're below these rejects. You're quirkless. What makes you think you stand in the same ring as me?" I'm not trying to upstage you or anything like that, Kaken. I just want to be a hero too. Stop being delusional, you stupid nerd. It doesn't matter if you take the test. You're as worthless as you are quirkless. What can you do?" Izuku, unfortunately, did not have an answer to that. Not yet, anyway. "Alright. That's enough," the teacher said, waving a paper around to get the attention back on him. "As entertaining as this is, I will have to report the damaged desk. If neither of you wants to get into any more trouble, I suggest you sit down and pay attention. We still have a lesson for today." Growling, Bakugo went back to his desk. He mumbling something about a shitty old man. Izuku went back to his desk too. Izuku wasn't able to focus on the lesson all that much, so he instead focused more on his journals. Right now he was on his 14th and he was revising the notes on Kamui Woods. Except that this time, he was mindful not to make a sound. He didn't want any more attention on him. The rest of the day passed by uneventfully. No one talked to Izuku, but that was normal. That's why he focused on his notebook the entire school days. Right now, he was looking at a picture he had drawn when he was little. It was something he saw on the news and drew in all of his notebooks. His father and All Might were shaking hands. It was something Izuku constantly asked his father about, even if he didn't get an answer. Something about respecting privacy. Izuku's musings were cut short when the notebook was snatched from the desk. Kaken. The hell you looking at now, nerd?" Bakugo took one look at the drawing. He sneered. "You really still look up to these old geezers? Don't you realize that I'm going to be on top of both of them someday? I mean, I admire them both. I just remember that time they were on the news together." Izuku didn't really know how to word his thoughts. His father had always told him to keep their powers and origins a secret. He didn't want either of them to be known as aliens until the right time, so he said. "Well, that's all they're going to be once I reach the top. Old news. But you, Deku," Bakugo said as he crushed the notebook. "You won't ever be newsworthy." Boom. Kaken. Izuku couldn't only watch in desperate hopelessness as Bakugo blew up his notebook and tossed it out the window. "Do yourself a favor and give up, Deku. Without a quirk, no one is going to give you the light of day." Bakugo rejoined his two friends to go to the arcade, leaving a distraught Izuku behind. Izuku found his notebook in one of the ponds outside of the school. Surprisingly, it wasn't in terrible condition. Most of the pages were still legible, despite being burned and wet. But Izuku was too upset to be able to feel relief. Bakugo's words kept ringing in his head. "Do yourself a favor and give up, Deku. Without a quirk, no one is going to give you the light of day." The thing was, Bakugo was right. In this superhuman society, the only way to gain recognition and acceptance was to have a power of your own. Even a weak quirk was better than none. Otherwise, you were exempt from everything. The worst part was that even if Izuku wouldn't have a quirk, the powers he could disguise as a quirk hadn't come in either. Izuku's father had always said that his Viltrumite abilities were bound to kick in eventually, but it had been more than a decade since he had first said that. And despite all of his father's assurances, Izuku was beginning to doubt if he would ever get his powers. And if he did, it might be too late. Most of the best hero schools only accepted teenagers. There were some courses you could take as an adult, but those were rarer and nowhere near as prestigious. And none of them were UA. All Might's alma mater and the best hero school in Japan. All Might was the greatest hero in Japan, probably the second greatest in the world. And he was one of Izuku's idols, one of the two men he has looked up to all of his life. And without any sort of power, Izuku had no hope of being like either of them. It was that line of thought that guided Izuku towards Dagaba Beach. It was a place Izuku used to go with his family a lot. Back when the beach was actually inhabitable. Nowadays, there was too much trash to even recognize it as a beach anymore. Everything from candy wrappers to junk refrigerators, people started to feel free to just dump any and all garbage that they could find onto these sands. So of course Izuku would go there when he was upset. He felt right at home amongst the garbage. I'm never going to be a hero, am I? Izuku sat down on the sand as that thought kept coursing through his mind. It wasn't a thought he wanted in his head. It wasn't one that he relished or even liked to consider. But it was one that was getting stronger every day. And today it was especially palpable. UA might accept a quirkless student, but never into the hero course. Even if I make it in, I won't make it in. Izuku tried, he really tried, to fight back the tears. But he wasn't able to stop them from flowing down from his eyes and onto his face. Snot and mucus dripped from his nose too, with no way for Izuku to stop himself. All he could do was wallow in his own sadness, sitting down by himself on a beach. Suddenly, there was another emotion coupled with Izuku's sadness. He was angry. This isn't fair. It isn't fair. Izuku kicked a small metal pipe, not even bothering to see where it went. He just wanted to kick it. My dad's the strongest person in the world. And my mom has a decent quirk. And what do I get out of that? Izuku clenched his fist and gritted his teeth. He already knew the answer. Nothing. I didn't get anything out of it. Izuku grabbed a rock and chugged it at the water. He wiped his eyes of tears and looked ahead. He saw clean and clear water. Izuku's eyes widened when he realized that there were no ripples in the water. The only way that would have happened was if. Izuku picked up another rock from the sand. This time he kept his eyes focused directly forward as he geared up his arm. Moving it back and getting ready. He tossed the rock. Izuku watched with joyful and disbelieving eyes as the rock shot across the sky. It flew for miles and miles. Izuku lost track of how far away the rock went. He didn't even know if it landed in the water. They're here. Izuku had to say it to himself again in order to believe it. They were finally here. I got my powers. I got my powers. Izuku immediately turned around to run home. He had to tell his parents. His dad would be so happy. Izuku was so happy himself that he didn't realize how fast he was moving. Anything interesting, Hisashi? Not really. They do have my morning workout here though. Hisashi was sitting at the kitchen table, a newspaper in his hands. It was a habit he had formed after learning to read Japanese. It was a relaxing setting he had come to enjoy. His wife would cook dinner while he would sit and read. So fighting a giant monster is a workout to you? Well, it is one of two possible workouts, Hisashi said with a sly grin as his eyes took in his wife's slim form. Since Izuku isn't here, we can discuss it if you'd like. Maybe bring this up when I'm not cooking, Hisashi, Inko said with false annoyance. Besides, our son is due any minute now. You wouldn't want him to walk in on us, would you? Well, maybe if he saw us, he would. Hisashi was cut off when the front door was thrown open. Izuku ran inside the house, an impenetrable smile on his face and light on his feet. I got my powers. I finally got them. Hisashi looked to his wife for a moment before turning to Izuku. His face was placid. Are you sure? Izuku frowned. He had expected a more excited reaction. Yes. I mean, I just threw a pipe at the sky. I think it crossed the ocean. Inko lightly kicked her husband's leg to send him the message. Oh. That's great, son. Hisashi said a little too quickly. Tell you what. I'll call off of work for tomorrow. And I'll call your school to let them know you won't be showing up. We'll spend the day on starting your training. Really? Of course. With your powers finally here, who else can train you to use them? And it's better to get started as soon as possible. I'd suggest eating first, Inko interrupted. Wouldn't want to fly on an empty stomach now, would you? I certainly don't want to. And you, son? Izuku, who hadn't eaten in hours, nodded vigorously. And as he ate with his family, his mind wandered to what tomorrow could bring. He couldn't wait. Izuku couldn't sleep. He tried to, but the excitement of what he would be doing tomorrow kept him from being able to rest. He would finally be able to train with his father, using powers that he finally had. He had spent the past 15 years waiting for them, and now he had them. Izuku knew he was fast and strong now. But there was still one power he hadn't tried out yet. One that his father said they would be focusing on extensively tomorrow. Flight. Izuku had seen his father flying for years. He made it look easy. But when Izuku thought about it, he realized that he had no idea how he would even start to think about doing it. Except that he was doing it right now. Izuku couldn't feel the pillow under his head anymore. He couldn't feel the mattress on his back. Turning his head slightly, Izuku could see the bed underneath him. He was floating right above it. Whoa. Izuku didn't have any other words to describe how he felt. It was an exhilarating feeling, even if he was only above his bed. But it did raise one question. How do I? Izuku suddenly lost his momentum and fell back on the bed. His head back on the pillow, Izuku shuffled a bit as he got used to gravity affecting him again. Now he really couldn't wait. The next morning. You up yet? Izuku woke up to see his father standing at his door, dressed in full costume. Which was weird to Izuku. He was used to seeing his father, sure. But he also associated the costume with the way his father seen on TV. Stay in bed any longer, we might miss the sun. I thought you wanted to fly today. I do. Just let me get changed, Dad. Hisashi chuckled. I'll wait at the door, Izuku. Don't keep me waiting too long. With his father gone, Izuku put on the best clothes he had for training like this. Which happened to be a grey hoodie and a pair of green sweatpants. He quickly ran outside his room, seeing his mother sitting in the living room. Will you be alright, sweetie? I'll be fine, Mom. I'll be with Dad. Alright. Have fun. I will. Bye. Izuku quickly went outside. His dad was waiting for him at the ledge. Are you ready? Izuku had to take several deep breaths to calm himself down. He still had trouble believing that this was happening. Yeah, I think so. Good. Follow me then. Hisashi floated up off the balcony to the apartment. He was waiting for Izuku to follow him. Wait. We're doing this here. But public quirk usage is illegal without a license. Hisashi just chuckled. You need to relax a little, Izuku. You won't be able to fly if you're too stiff. And besides, I applied to get you a flying license back when you were born. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? When I was born? I didn't know at what age your powers would manifest, so I decided to get it early. You're free to fly so long as a pro hero, which in this case is me, is supervising you. Now get off the ground so I can see what I'm working with. Izuku didn't have any reason to keep his dad waiting. If he really did have a license for him, then it was time to learn to fly. But that in mind, Izuku took his feet off the ground. He tried to remember how he felt last night. Weightless, but balanced. The air would carry him, but he could push himself in the direction he needed to go. And right now, he was right next to his father. Okay, you got the first step done. Take off. Now we just need to work on everything else, Hisashi said as he turned his body around. Fly after me. Let's see how well you can keep up. Hisashi took off to the east, and Izuku struggled to keep up with him. It was one thing to float above your own bed. It was a completely different endeavor to try and fly after a person who had at least decades of experience flying. Izuku had to constantly push himself to try and even keep up with his father, who seemed to not even be putting much effort into staying afloat. Flying is like a muscle, Izuku. It's good to relax that muscle from time to time. Let the momentum you build up carry you through the air instead of constantly pushing yourself too far. Izuku flew faster past Hisashi. Which concerned the man a little bit, even though he was able to quickly catch up. Okay. Think of it like taking baby steps. It was hard when you were a toddler, but eventually, you were able to walk without thinking. Flying is very little difference. You're just an infant at it. Okay, that makes sense. Think of it like peeing your pants on purpose, Hisashi said with a grin. A grin that grew when Izuku's face was flabbergasted. What? Peeing your pants on purpose? It's something that you spend your entire life avoiding. So if someone asked you to do it on the spot, you wouldn't be able to, Hisashi explained. You spent your entire life on the ground. You feel like you belong on the earth. Because of that, asking you to relax in the air feels impossible. Why would you make a comparison to peeing your pants? How would you even come up with that? Follow me, Hisashi said without answering Izuku's question. Let's land on the beach down here. Hisashi started to descend towards the beach. From the corner of his eye, he could see Izuku struggling. Son, you need to relax. Calm down. Izuku could barely hear his father through all the air passing his ears as he descended to the ground. I can't. Land. Son, stop. He didn't. Izuku flailed and yelled as he fell on the junk pile on the beach. He ended up creating a crater on impact. Hisashi landed next to the crater and waited for Izuku to come out. Ugh, Izuku groaned as he pulled himself out of the hole. I think I'm fine. That didn't hurt. That's good. Just don't get used to it, Hisashi said as he took a look around the beach. It was mostly empty thanks to the trash. No bystanders. And the junk might be useful for later. Let's try something different. Try to hit me. Izuku's eyes bulged. Was this for real? Seriously? Yeah. Let's see how much strength we have to work with. If I can feel it, that means you're on the right track. Go ahead. Hisashi was smiling, so Izuku figured he felt secure in what he was saying. And Izuku had seen his father get hit with a lot of heavy stuff and come out fine. So this shouldn't be a problem. With that in mind, Izuku balled his hand into a fist and tossed it at his father, who dodged it easily. I thought I asked you to hit me, Izuku. Are you going to do it? Frowning, Izuku made another fist and launched it at his father. Again, he missed. You're not going to hit me with just your fist, Izuku, Hisashi said as he stepped off the ground and floated a few feet away from Izuku. But if you add your hip, your shoulder, and the rest of your arm to the attack, you'll have a better chance. And remember, we don't have to worry about building momentum for an attack. We can pivot off of any point to strike. We can literally build our own momentum. Izuku decided to take his father's advice. He took his feet off the ground. He then tried using his entire body to power his attack. He was still missing, but he was getting closer. Good. Keep that up. But try something like this. Like what, Dad? In response, Hisashi shot a fist directly into Izuku's chest. One that instantly knocked the wind right out of Izuku's lungs. HRRK, Izuku felt the air in his lungs being trapped by the hit. It took him a moment to be able to breathe normally again. But even then, he had to crumble on the ground due to the pain in his chest. The whole time Izuku was struggling, not the ground, Hisashi was floating above him, tearing down on his son with critical eyes. He did not seem pleased. Dad, that hurt. Suddenly, Hisashi's face shifted to one of concern. He knelt down on the ground next to his son, grabbing a hold of his shoulder to help balance him. I'm sorry, son. I should have held back a bit more on that punch. But it is a part of the lesson. The lesson? Izuku questioned with a hoarse voice. Izuku, if you really want to do what I do, then you'll need to learn to take hits like these. Worse ones even. Because the people and things you'll end up fighting, they won't pull their punches the way I will. Later. Inko wasn't used to being all alone in her house. Usually she had her husband to keep her company while Izuku was at school or hanging out somewhere. And if not, then Izuku would be at home while Hisashi was out doing his work or exercising on the moon. So being alone while both of them were out was a little strange to her. But she had a feeling it was something she would have to get used to. Even if having no one to talk to also meant having little to do. Right now, she was entertaining herself by looking back on her old family photos. She had a few from when she left home and said goodbye to her parents. But most of them were with her husband and son. She still had the newspaper clipping from the day she met Hisashi. The day he saved her from being crushed by a flying truck. He was still wearing that weird white outfit of his then. He had said that it was a Viltrumite uniform, but it always looked a little silly to her. There were pictures from after they got married too. Their wedding had been interesting, mostly because Hisashi had no idea what to do and almost got into a fight with a photographer. It was honestly a little endearing how protective he got at times. She had a photo of when Izuku was born. That was one of the only times she had even seen Hisashi nervous. He had been pacing around the entire hospital that day. He probably would have flown laps around the planet if he hands decided to stay in the building. Throughout the pictures, it was easy to see how little Hisashi changed, physically. Aside from the goatee he grew to complement his mustache, his looks were stagnant. The same messy black hair he passed on to Izuku through her sons had streaks of her green color and the same gray eyes. He had said something about how little his people physically changed. Just as she was going to see more pictures, the door opened. Both her husband and son came in, both in regular clothes. Welcome back. How did it go? Inko saw her son's shoulders slumped. And her husband was rigid. Something went wrong. It was fine, Mom. I'll be in my room. Izuku ran into his room faster than Inko could respond. So it was clear that his powers had manifested. So she had to turn to her husband. Hisashi. What happened out there? Nothing major. We just trained. Inko could tell by the scowl on his face that he was lying. Why don't you just tell me the truth, Hisashi? What actually happened out there? Nothing important. I just pushed him a little more than he was used to, Hisashi told his wife. He was going to sit down in the kitchen, but Inko stood in his way. You pushed him? Is it possible that you went just a little too far? Inko, with all due respect, this is Viltrumite business. You wouldn't understand. Inko returned a scowl back at her own husband. Viltrumite business. Hisashi, in case you hadn't noticed, your son wasn't born on your planet. He was born on Earth among humans, Inko scolded her husband. Did it ever occur to you that training your son as one of your people wouldn't work? He wasn't born on Viltrum. Hisashi was going to retort, but the response died in his throat. All he could do was scrunch his face as he conceded to his wife. No. I hadn't considered that. It's just Izuku got his powers so late. I wasn't prepared. Not like I should have been, Hisashi admitted as he sat down at the kitchen table. I thought teaching him the way I was taught might be best. I hadn't considered that he might be different. Inko sat down and grabbed her husband's hand. He looks up to you, Hisashi. More than you realize. You just need a better way to connect with him. I'm sure this will all work out in the end. I hope so, Inko, Hisashi said with a serious tone. I really do. Inside his room, Izuku was trying his best to keep himself from crying. It wasn't so much that he was sad. He was just disappointed in himself for how the day went. He had expected learning to fly with Dad to be an amazing experience. Something he would remember for the rest of his life. And he would. But not for the reasons he had hoped. And he was still rubbing his chest for light pain. Hisashi's last lesson was something that Izuku couldn't get out of his mind. His father was right, fighting villains was something that would obviously involve taking a lot of hits. He had seen the aftermath of a few villain attacks, and the heroes didn't always look their best afterward. Still, it was a hard lesson to swallow. And Izuku was still coming to terms with it. I didn't know it at the time, but my father was right. Being a hero meant I would have to take a lot of hits. It came with the job. I just wish I knew then how many hits I would end up taking. Knock. Knock. Wake up, Izuku. I'm here to make it up to you. Huh? Dad? The door opened, letting Hisashi come into Izuku's room. He was still in civilian clothes, and he looked less disappointed than earlier. Okay. I think we can both admit that training did not go according to plan. It's okay, Dad. You were trying to teach me a lesson. I was trying to teach you. And I should have focused on teaching. Not hurting you, Hisashi admitted without hesitation. I'm not going to say what I did was wrong. I just shouldn't have done it so soon. You've only had your power for a day, and I shouldn't have expected you to understand so soon. Probably should have waited until next week. At least. Hisashi sighed as he sat down next to his son. I think we both need to figure out how this will work. I thought you had a training plan set out. I thought I did. But after talking with your mother, I realized that I really can't teach you the way I was taught, Hisashi admitted. Even before I got my powers, Viltrumite values and discipline were already being drilled into me. Preparing me for the day that would be able to contribute more fully to society. Hisashi gently held his son's shoulder. You weren't raised the same way I was. Your mother wanted you raised as a human, and I didn't have it in me to say no. Otherwise I would have started training you on the moon the moment your powers kicked on. Is there a space station on the moon? Not that I know of. And we wouldn't need one anyway. Izuku's eyes widened. What? Something to teach you about later. My point is, I need to revise the entire strategy I had set out, Hisashi informed his son. I thought I could use the same training plan I always knew, but it's clear that it won't work. Because of that, we'll need to figure out our own plan. Our own plan? How do we make it? I think we're already off to be a better start. We're having a conversation, Hisashi commented. You tell me, son. What do you think we should focus on training right now? Izuku wanted to respond quickly, but he had to take a moment to think about it. And the more he thought, the more he realized something. I've only had my powers for about a day. I still don't know which of them I'm best with or worse with. I need to know more about my powers before I can make any judgment. Izuku rubbed his chest. Though I can probably work on becoming more durable. It's a start, Hisashi added. In truth, he had about as much of an idea of how to help Izuku as Izuku did. But as he had said, it was a start. And when Hisashi saw the open notebook on Izuku's desk, he realized that there was something he could help his son with. Coming up with a costume? Izuku's eyes brightened when his father brought it up. Yeah. I'm trying to come up with something that works. Something that would show people the kind of hero I want to be. Hisashi stared at his son. Okay. What kind of hero do you want to be? All Might is the hero that brings hope to people with his smile. He makes them all feel safe. You do that too. The fact that you use your powers to protect them makes them feel like they have nothing to worry about. Izuku took a breath. I want to do that too. Both of you are the best heroes in the world. I want to be like that too. Hisashi smirked. His son's idealism might not be normal, but it was boundless. And Hisashi had to wonder where it came from. Still, it was nice. It's nice to know my own son thinks highly of me. And if I see All Might, I'll be sure to let him know. Hisashi picked up the notebook and held it in front of Izuku. But more on the topic at hand. You have an idea of what kind of costume you want. Why don't we hammer out the details and get it made? Izuku's eyes widened. We can do that. But I thought you had to be in a hero school for that. I know someone who could make it. And besides, why not have it done ahead of time? Give yourself an advantage over those people you'd be in class with. But what if I don't make it in? Izuku, if they really want capable people out there protecting innocents, they'd have to be stupid to turn you away. Especially after we train you to get stronger. So what do you say? Izuku's mood was now a full 180 turn from what it had been just an hour earlier. His first lesson with his dad hadn't gone great, but now they were figuring out how to fix that issue. They could make a foundation for future training sessions to go better. Even better, his dad was helping him to get a hero costume months before he would even apply to UA. That was because he believed that Izuku would make it in. And if things worked out he would. Right now, Izuku felt like things would work out for the better. One bad day wouldn't bring him down. Island. Hisashi had to admit, for a species centuries behind his own people, humans were on the right track to catch up. It would still take a long time, but they were on the right track. This island is a prime example. While still far from complete, the potential it held for the development of mankind as a species could not be disputed. All the best scientists and technology in one place. Definitely wasn't anything to scoff at. As soon as Hisashi was close to the one building that housed the person he came to see, he began his quick descent. The security system was up to date yet, so he had no trouble walking inside. And even if security was there, they would calm down once they saw what he was wearing. The power of a uniform. Once Hisashi had made it to the lab he had come to visit, he knocked. Who is it? Hisashi smirked. I don't know, David. Who else would fly hundreds of miles in a few minutes just to see you? Hisashi heard some rustling inside the room before the door burst open. A man with disheveled brown hair and glasses came out. Hisashi. Hey David. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine Hisashi. But what are you doing here? The Viltrumite raised a brow. Are you okay David? You sound a little worried. Is this a bad time? David immediately composed himself. No. Sorry, I just wasn't expecting you today. What can I do for you? Hisashi kept his eyebrow raised but still took the blueprints from his pocket. I was wondering if I could ask a favor from you. Curious, David took the paper from Hisashi. He read the design, only to be left confused. Okay, this is obviously not for you. So, why would you ask me to make a hero costume for someone else? Especially a kid. Because that kid is my son. The new surprise almost gave David a heart attack. Your son? I didn't even know you had a wife. It's part of the deal I made with the UN when I came to the planet. I help deal with the disasters normal heroes can't, and in exchange, I get to keep my privacy, Hisashi explained. My son's powers hadn't come in, so I decided to keep his existence quiet until he could defend himself. I didn't want any enemies coming after him. David wasn't sure how to take this information. He knew that he and Hisashi weren't exactly friends, but he never expected the man to this secretive. Then again, Hisashi wasn't Tashi. Okay. I'm guessing your son will want a costume so he can try to be a hero. David asked with a slightly hopeful undertone to his voice. Yeah. He actually wants to try out for UA, if you can believe it. Tashi's school. This caused David to pause. If Hisashi's son wanted to go there, then maybe there was a chance. I think so. I'll be honest and say that I don't usually keep up with hero facts. My son memorizes more than enough of those for me, Hisashi reminisced with a chuckle. Do you think you can make it? Huh? Oh sure, David quickly said. This shouldn't be a problem, I could have it made within a week easily. Thanks. Let me know how I can make it up to you David. I'll see you around. As Hisashi left, David quickly closed the door and went back to his computer. He left the blueprint on his desk to work on another day. Right now, he was busy opening up the file he had on Earth's only outside resident. The file had all of Omni-Man's known powers and abilities listed. Weaknesses were still empty, but there was another subfolder to open. Second Viltrumite. Last week. Christopher, we need to talk. Not now Pamela. What was that Donald? Christopher Skyline, better known as Captain Celebrity, was talking with his manager over the phone. He was trying to move the children's school visit to next week so he could finish his reality TV quota. He was just one away from meeting 20. So long as he stayed in public knowledge, his spot in the ranking wouldn't change. He was the US #1 for a reason. He was the best hero in America. He was. I'm pregnant, Christopher. Skyline's cheek grin suddenly morphed into a shocked frown. He couldn't even hear what Donald was saying over the phone anymore. And he was noticing. Chris, you alright? I heard Pamela. Did something. I'll call you back Donald. What? But Chris, we. Skyline hung up the phone as he tried to process what he was feeling. His constant blinking, stammering, and shuffling his feet made it clear how difficult it was for him. "Pamela, you're pregnant. That's great. We can. And I'm leaving." Skyline almost choked. "What? Pamela, we're having a baby. I am having your baby, Christopher. But it is clear to me that I cannot trust you to raise it with me." "Can't trust me? Pamela, I'm the #1 US hero. You can trust me." "I can only trust you for a few things, Christopher," Pamela said almost bitterly. Mostly with disappointment. "I can trust you to never come home from those parties. I can trust you to chase every skirt that catches your eye. I can trust you to spend your days laughing it up with talk show hosts and reporters rather than being here with me." Pamela Skyline tried to find a response. He couldn't think of a good one. The more he tried to think of a retort, the more he realized he didn't have one. "I can't trust you, Christopher, no matter how much I might love you. I can't stay." Pamela turned to leave. A small part of Skyline almost wanted to let her go. She was right. He hadn't been doing what he needed to do. Not for her. Maybe she would be better off without him. But the rest of Skyline didn't agree and he grabbed a hold of her arm. "Pamela, wait. Let me just make one promise." "A promise? Christopher, you've broken every promise you've made to me since we got married." "I know. So I won't make this promise to you. I'll make it to the baby." Pamela was a little taken aback by the declaration. She hadn't been expecting that. "The baby hasn't been born, so I haven't disappointed it yet. Let me keep that up," Skyline pleaded. "I'll stop chasing women. I will take a class for it if you want. I'll stop going on TV so much." Normally, such a promise would hurt Skyline. But right now, it didn't. "Please, I'll do whatever you want, Pamela. I don't want to absent from my own kid's life." Pamela knew that last part was personal. For reasons that Christopher didn't like to talk about. But she didn't know that if she could trust that. Christopher had gone back on his word to her before. He was a good hero, but being a husband was where he had failed. But he has one thing right. He hadn't failed their child. "One last chance, Christopher." The pro-hero's eyes widened behind his goggles. They were more joyful than Pamela had seen them in a long time. "Thank you. Thank you so much, Pamela. I promise you won't regret this." Skyline enveloped his wife in a tight hug. She might have her reservations, but he had every intention of doing this right. He knew that he wasn't a great husband. He knew that some people thought his actions disqualified him from being the #1 hero, not without complete reason. And he knew that someone was always doubting, no matter how much effort he put into what he did. Part of the reason he had become a hero was to show that he could do it. None of that mattered to him right now. He was going to be a father. That was one thing he couldn't mess up. Now. These memories from last week and more thoughts and more were running through Skyline's head as he walked to the edge of his personal yacht. He wondered if keeping this was overcompensation for something. He was beginning to think it might be. "Are you sure you want to do this alone, celebrity? We would be glad to send a drone with you." "It's fine, Jeffrey. I want to be alone right now. I have a lot on my mind." Receiving a nod from Jeffrey, Captain Celebrity, America's #1 hero, took off to the ocean sky. He left his yacht behind nearer to the shore of New York. What he had told his manager was true. He wanted to be alone right now. Captain Celebrity did not get scared. He might get nervous in a fight. He might get anxious over an interview. But he didn't get scared. He didn't. It wouldn't fit his image, so he didn't get scared. He didn't get scared. He was scared. Pamela was pregnant. With his son, as he now knew. Christopher Skyline was going to be a dad. The irresponsible playboy hero was going to be a father. Former irresponsible playboy hero, Skyline mentally reminded himself. He needed to keep that in the past. There was a reason he was flying over the Atlantic Ocean instead of the beach he frequented. He needed time to be alone and to think. This was going to be a major change. Being a dad meant he needed to make some major changes to himself. He couldn't be a playboy anymore. He needed to set a better example for his child. At least a better one than his own old man had given him. He might also have to make fewer TV appearances. And definitely keep his son out of the limelight. But despite his worries, Skyline felt good. He and his ex-wife might not see eye anymore, but he was sure they could put their differences aside if it meant ensuring that their kid would grow up alright. How knows, maybe they could even work things out. It was optimistic, but Skyline liked to think positively. "Christopher." Jumping, Skyline turned around to see someone floating behind him. The first thing he noticed was the O symbol on his chest. "Omni-Man. What are you doing here?" Skyline wasn't exactly friends with Omni-Man. The two had worked together and Skyline had tried to start conversations about more team-ups, but the powerhouse usually ignored him and flew away. He never knew why. And that made his sudden appearance here all the more confusing. "I heard about Pamela. Congratulations." "Oh. Thank you, Skyline said, genuinely surprised. He never expected Omni-Man to suddenly approach him over something like this. Forgive me if this sounds rude, but I didn't expect to see you about this. I thought you wouldn't care. Normally I wouldn't. But as a husband and father myself, I thought I could reach out. You have a kid? Skyline was getting a lot of surprises this week. Yeah. I have a teenager, actually. He's at that age. A teenager? How come you've never mentioned it? At least, I haven't heard anything about this. I like to keep things private. And besides, my son is a late bloomer. He's only recently started to show signs of his powers. Just recently? That is late, Skyline admitted. Hey, since you've raised him this far, could you offer me some advice? Of course. I did say I came here to reach out. Skyline smiled as he drifted closer to Omni-Man. And you? I've been really nervous about this whole thing. Maybe this can. Splat. Skyline's breath stopped when he heard the noise. He registered the sound before he felt the pain. Looking down, he saw what it was. Omni-Man's fist was lodged inside his chest. Right, where his lungs were. Why? Blood spilled from Skyline's mouth as he struggled to breathe, let alone speak. Omni-Man had not destroyed his lungs, but his fist was so close as to rupture them. His fist had gone through him like paper, and there wasn't anything he could do about it. I doubt anyone will miss you. But I should make sure that no evidence remains. Grabbing a hold of Skyline's shoulder and pulling out the bloody fist, Omni-Man took towards the sky. Dragging Skyline with him. The #1 American pro-hero was helpless to do anything as Omni-Man forced him higher to the sky. He couldn't even scream or make any noise as he was pulled higher and higher above his limit. Even when he could fly normally, he had to stop before the air got too thin. Omni-Man showed no care or mercy to Captain Celebrity as the two of them went higher and higher. The force caused Skyline to lose consciousness as they approached the start of the Earth's atmosphere. Once they reached it, the problem of Skyline's body took care of itself. The heat of the atmosphere soon burned his body within seconds. There wasn't even a shred of a piece of ash left when physics took over. Omni-Man looked at his hand when he felt the loss of weight occur. The American hero was disintegrated, leaving no trace that he had ever even lived. Even more, passing through the atmosphere burned away the blood that had been on his hand, destroying any evidence that might exist of what had just happened. Omni-Man released out a sigh as he let the moment pass. That's done. Turning back to the planet, the caped Viltrumite rocketed towards Japan. Having just felt the closeness of the sun's rays, it was noticeable when he entered Japan, now in the nighttime. But that didn't bother him. He was used to seeing changes when he entered back to the surface of a planet. He descended until he reached the family apartment. Omni-Man stepped at the front door. Hisashi walked through it. I'm back. Dad. Izuku went towards his father. Hisashi was pleased to see Izuku levitating above the ground. Putting in some practice. Yeah. Trying to make staying in the air easier and more natural for myself, Izuku explained. How did it go? Hisashi smiled. Give it about a week. You'll have a costume ready long before you even step at that school's gates. Izuku's smile was wide enough to envelop his entire face. Hisashi was shocked when his son wrapped his arms around him and buried his face in his shoulder. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. Smiling much more softly, Hisashi returned the hug. You're welcome, son. I hope this makes up for earlier, Hisashi said as the two let go. Now why don't you go and rest? We'll pick back up tomorrow as soon as you get home from school. Alright. See you, Dad. Inko walked in just as Izuku closed himself into his room. She noticed the smile on her son's face. I take it you were able to fix things. Yes. Things should be right on track now, Hisashi said as he hugged his wife. A pleasantly surprised wife. Oh. Getting a little excited, Hisashi. Just showing my gratitude. I wouldn't have been able to fix things without your help. Hisashi let his face glide closer to Inko's. I could show you my gratitude in another way if you'd like. Inko blushed slightly, but she didn't back away. Izuku is awake. He might hear us. I sent him to get ready for training tomorrow. There is not a chance he'll be listening. Are you sure? Would I suggest it if I wasn't? As Inko led her husband back to their room, the Viltrumite felt good. Maybe things could work out after all. In continuing news, the search goes on for the United States pro-hero Captain Celebrity. Last seen a week ago departing his personal yacht, the #1 hero has since then been. Crash. The television news coverage was cut short when a motorcycle crashed through the shop window and smashed the screen. Similar carnage was occurring in the area. Right now, a villain with a gigantification quirk was rampaging through the street. A rather common occurrence in Mustafa. But today, the problem was the fact that he wouldn't go down. Come on. Why is he so hard to deal with right now? Deed Arms shouted. I don't know, Kamui Woods answered calmly. In truth, he was just as frustrated as Death Arms, he was just better at hiding it. They had been called in to deal with Giant because of how well they dealt with the last one. Even though Mount Lady gave the finishing blow, they were the ones who did most of the work. And they hoped to not be interrupted today. But they were beginning to think they could use some help. Especially since the villain had resorted to tossing cars around. Move. Kamui converted one of his wooden arms to a tendril and used it to pull Death Arms out of the way. He was just in time to prevent his coworker from turning into a paste on the street. Thanks Kamui. What now? Try to distract the monster. I'll see if I can get his legs. With no other plan in mind, Death Arms decided to follow Kamui's lead. Hey ugly. Why don't you aim at someone who can fight back? This got the villain's attention. He noticed Death Arms below him, so he lifted his fist and prepared to smash him. But the villain hadn't noticed Kamui Woods, who had wrapped one of his arms around the giant's feet. What the ah? The villain fell face-first onto the pavement. Death Arms was able to move out of the way in time. He looked towards Kamui. He's down. Now let's work on. He wasn't down. He was just pissed off now. The villain swung his arm, smacking Death Arms across the street. Death Arms. The villain responded to the momentary distraction by picking up a car and tossing it at the muscular hero. He then kicked Kamui Woods back, forcing the hero on his own back. Oof. The wood hero fell back as he saw the car about to be hit by a car. And the civilians behind him would also take a blow. Seeing this, Death Arms stood up and prepared to stop the car himself. His arms held up, his quirk enhancing the strength in his arms to levels that he hoped would be enough. Don't be afraid civilians. I have this. Death Arms shut his eyes as he prepared to take the brunt of the blow. But it never came. Tentatively, Death Arms opened his eyes. He saw the car floating in midair. But that wasn't the thing that surprised him. What surprised him was the person holding up the car. He would recognize the big red O anywhere. Need help? Omni-Man. What are you doing here? This isn't the sort of work you get involved in, Death Arms questioned. His only response was a nonchalant shrug from the much stronger hero. I was in the area. And with there being nothing that needed my attention, I figured I could lend a hand, Omni-Man said as he let the car fall to the ground away from civilians. Besides, I have nothing better to do. Death Arms wasn't exactly reassured by the answer. A hero should help when they could, in his mind. But Omni-Man made it sound like an optional hobby. Still, he couldn't complain. Not with the giant villain still rampaging. Bring me a challenge. I'll destroy this whole city otherwise. The villain shouted to the sky. He turned around, intending to stomp on the vulnerable Kamui Woods. Kamui. Death Arms shouted, genuine concern for his friend and colleague filling his voice. He's a loud one, isn't he? Omni-Man quipped towards Death Arms, who wasn't as amused. Give me a second. Omni-Man flew forward, reaching Kamui Woods in moments. Just in time to pull him away from the villain's foot. Omni-Man. Yes, I'm here. No need to make a big deal. Do you need help? Kamui Woods nodded shakily. We'd appreciate any help with getting this villain apprehended. Say no more. Wait here. The alien hero took off instantly, leaving behind a shocked pro. He could only stand back and watch as Omni-Man rocketed towards the villain, his fist reared back. Haha. Who's going to stop me? None of you heroes can, huh? The giant's monologue was cut short when he caught sight of Omni-Man. He only saw the flying hero for a few seconds before he felt something hit in the chin. Normally, a blow like that would feel like a prick on his skin. This impact knocked his head back and made him smash his back against the hard concrete. He lost consciousness only moments after. There's that. Everyone alright? No one answered back to Omni-Man. Most of them were just surprised that he was there. And they were caught off guard by how quickly he knocked out the giant villain. Okay then. I'm out of here. Wait, Omni-Man, sir, Kamui Woods tried to get his attention. We still need to help with civilians. I know you are used to larger conflicts, but… Omni-Man didn't stay behind to listen. He took off to the sky and quickly disappeared from view. Death Arms walked to Kamui only seconds later. What just happened? Kamui just gave him a blank stare back. Honestly, I have no idea. Izuku was quiet as he took his things out of his locker. He had been training for a few days with his father and he felt like he was making some improvements. Not a whole lot, his father was still flying circles around him. But that was expected since he had been using his powers for years. Izuku only had his for a few days now. And he was getting better at getting close to hitting his dad. That was something. He was feeling good now. Better than he had in a long time. He had sent out the application a while ago and he felt that. Deku? Of course. Izuku turned around just in time for Katsuki to grab his shoulder and force him against the closed locker. I told you not to bother signing up for UA. Why am I hearing that you sent an application? Because I did send one. Itsuki looked like he was either going to laugh or growl. He didn't seem to know which. What makes you think you're going to get in? You're quirkless ass. Is there a point to this, Kaken? I'd rather get to my next class without being late. Hatsuki's mouth was gaping. This was the first time ever that Izuku had talked back to him. The spectators were just as shocked, whispering amongst themselves. You watch your mouth, Deku. If you don't, I'm going to make. If you're going to hit me or blow me up, just get it over with, Kaken. I have class. We both do. Gritting his teeth, Katsuki made a fist and threw it into Izuku's chest. The blow made Izuku drop his head. Maybe that would. Again, Izuku said as he quickly lifted his head back up. If you're going to hit me, do it harder. Infuriated, Katsuki gave Izuku a hook across the face. Again, Izuku straightened himself out without a scratch. Harder. Angered even further, Katsuki gave Izuku an uppercut that made his head face upwards. But when he brought his head back down, it was still neutral. If you're done, Kaken, I need to get to class. So do you, so why don't we both stop wasting time? Izuku swerved his feet to step aside from Katsuki. He was going to leave him behind when the blonde shot his hand out and grabbed Izuku's wrist. Deku? I thought you didn't have a quirk, the bully sneered. I didn't. Not until a few days ago. I'm a late bloomer. Bullshit. Why would you even get a quirk at this point? You think it's going to help you beat me into UA? Because. I'm not trying to beat you at anything, Kaken. My quirk just came in, and I plan to use it to get myself into UA. If you will be taking the test as well, I won't be in your way. Izuku tried to move, but Katsuki wouldn't let go. Izuku could easily tear himself away from the other boy, but he wasn't sure if he would also end up tearing off his arm. He didn't want to test that. Izuku, if you even try. I'm not trying to do anything to you, Kaken. I want to be a hero the same way you do. I just finally have a way to do it. And I'd appreciate it if you stopped bothering me and let me focus on that. Izuku shrugged his arm out of Katsuki's grip and walked to class. Everyone else had already dispersed, so there was no issue for Izuku in making it to the room. But Katsuki was stuck in place. Nothing major had happened, but his entire world had been shifted. He was supposed to be the powerful one, but Deku now had a quirk. Because of some stupid late bloomer shit. Which meant that useless Deku wasn't going to stop himself from getting in the way, which was not what Katsuki had wanted. He wanted to be the first person from this shitty school to go out and be something. And he had everything he needed to make it there. But now he would just be one of two. Not number one. One of two. He didn't know how to deal with that. Endeavor welcomed challenges. He was a man who always believed in pushing himself to his limits and as far past them as he could. He was someone who liked to earn titles and rank through his own efforts most of the time. Which was why he was so infuriated at having to deal with a villain that All Might had already famously dealt with months ago. You won't stop me, heroes. I'll get a good body yet. The same sludge monster from a few weeks ago was causing a ruckus in the city again. How he had escaped his cell at the prison, Endeavor did not know. He also didn't care to ask. He was just angry at having to deal with All Might's sloppy seconds. Can't you do something, Endeavor? I can only make so many coverings for civilians. And I couldn't bear to see any of these good people infected. Crust, Japan's shield hero, had also been called in to deal with this mess. His job was mostly just to keep the sludge man from infecting any innocent bystanders. And Endeavor had little time for the overly emotional man. Keep doing it until I can get a good shot. Once I burn him up a bit, we can get him sent back to prison and you won't have to worry anymore. I knew it. You do care, Endeavor. The green-caped man clutched his chest with tears threatening to leave his eyes. Endeavor did not want to stand next to him any longer. I'm going in. Keep protecting them. If Endeavor had to, he would go all out. And if Crust made enough shields for bystanders not to get burned, then he wouldn't have to sign as much paperwork later. The flame hero. Not a good host, if I'm being honest. Why don't you do me a favor and leave? Endeavor hated listening to the thing's voice. It was gurgly in a way he did not like. Like a smoker trying to talk underwater. Why don't you surrender and make things easier for me? I won't have to incinerate you. Not sounding very heroic, are you, Endeavor? I think I'll just go. Not on my watch. Creating a ball of flame in his hands, Endeavor chugged the fireball at the slimy villain. But the sludge was able to dodge. Oh no. I am getting out of here. Endeavor tried to throw more fireballs, but the sludge villain was surprisingly fast. He dodged every attack that Endeavor threw and managed to weave his way past the flame hero. Crust tried to block him. The shield hero obliged. He generated as many rocky hexagonal shields from his body as he could. He then proceeded to throw as many of them as he could in the sludge villain's path. He knew he couldn't make enough to really stop him, but he hoped to obscure the path long enough to give Endeavor a chance to do something. But it didn't work. The sludge wasn't solid, so the villain was able to weave his way past all of the shields. Nothing that Crust put up was able to stop him. Later heroes. I am going. To shut up. Please say it's that. Every pair of eyes saw a figure descend and block the sludge villain's path. A blue and red suit accented with a red cape made him instantly recognizable. Omni-Man. Both Crust and Endeavor questioned. Neither of them knew what the hero was doing here. This was a catastrophic event, as far as they could tell. Now there's a body. The sludge villains changed his goal from escape to ensnarement. If he could ensnare a body this powerful, all of his problems would be solved. That over here. Omni-Man didn't even bother to move. He saw the sludge villain ramming towards him and ignored the yells from civilians and heroes. Get out of here. You're not supposed to be here, Omni-Man. Please move. I couldn't bear to see you hurt. He's going to get you. Omni-Man ignored all of their screams and instead reached out with his hands. And clapped. Boom. The force of the impact caused shockwaves to ripple all across the street. Some bits of concrete crumbled off of the roads and the sludge villain came apart. Literally. Small drops of fluid began to rain once the shockwaves settled. And all the slime pieces that once made up a villain started to come back together, giving Omni-Man very little time. He flew into a nearby store and came out with a water bottle that he emptied into a nearby drain. Was not expecting this today. Just glad I didn't get any on my clothes. Using his speed, Omni-Man picked up every piece of the sludge villain and capped him into the bottle. A bottle that he then handed to Endeavor. You can handle this, right? The flame hero angrily and confusingly took the bottle. What are you doing here, Omni-Man? The work you do involves disaster. This is my. Thanks. I'll be heading home now. The secret alien took off to the sky before Endeavor could say anything else. He would have yelled back, but then he heard sniffling beside him. Such a compassionate man. Helping others despite not having to. And he doesn't have the popularity he deserves. Truly a great example. Besides having his glory stolen and dealing with Crust's emotions, Endeavor growled as he felt that he had dealt with enough today. But he was also concerned as to why Omni-Man even came here. The man had made his stance on heroics clear years ago. He would only get involved in incidents if he thought they required his attention. It was the only reason All Might was the #1 hero instead of him. All Might was seen helping people more often. He was known for a smile that brought hope. While Endeavor did not entirely agree with how All Might worked, he would acknowledge its effectiveness. But Omni-Man was a larger unknown. He had the proper paperwork and licensing to be a hero, but few people knew anything else about him. He kept to himself and wasn't even officially on the hero rankings. Which was strange, since he would be high up if he was. Which was why Endeavor found his sudden appearance so strange. Why start acting like a hero now? Izuku walked home feeling a little bit lighter than he had before. He wasn't sure if it was some residual joy from finally getting Viltrumite powers or if it was because of what had happened at school. He finally stood up to Kaken. Just last week, Izuku would have never imagined himself being able to do that. He didn't have any powers or quirk, so he had no way to physically stand up to the blonde boy. He also didn't really want to, because Kaken had been his friend when they were kids. And no matter how bad things got, Izuku still wanted to hang on to those good memories. But things were different now. His father had told him as much. Now that he had his powers, Izuku had a responsibility to use them. And he wanted to follow his father's example and become one of the best heroes in the world. And he wasn't going to let Kaken hold him back from that dream. They were friends before, but Kaken was the one that decided to stop being friendly. This wasn't to say that Izuku hated the other boy. He still admired Kaken for how powerful his quirk was and how well he had learned to control it. He was just sad to finally realize how much his ego had taken over him. He was willing to start a fight in school just because another kid had also applied to UA. He wasn't even capable of comprehending the idea of sharing the glory. Izuku wouldn't deal with it. He didn't have to anymore. He could go on with his life, free from fearing Kaken anymore. And somehow, Izuku didn't feel too bad about not longer calling Kaken his friend anymore. It was the other boy's choice, and Izuku had a goal he wanted to achieve. Walking inside the house, he saw his father. He was wearing normal clothes, reading the newspaper in the living room. The main story being something about the ongoing search for an American hero. Welcome back, son. Anything interesting happens at school? Izuku shrugged. Not much. You? Same here. I guess we both had pretty boring days. Hisashi raised a brow from his paper. Care to do something that isn't boring? Can we? Hisashi chuckled as he made sure Izuku's permit was still in his pocket. How about this? The last one to the beach for training has to help with the dishes. I'll see you there. Hisashi smiled as his son dropped his backpack and raced out the door. Things were starting to look up. Entrance exam. 1. Inko was used to waking up alone. The times when her husband was right next to her when the sun rose were what she considered the good days. The days when there was no apocalyptic event that needed his attention. No hundreds in danger that needed his help. Just a simple morning where she could wake up and see her husband laying down next to her. She would often tickle his facial hair just to see if it would wake him up. He wasn't there this morning, which meant that she couldn't do that. But when she left her room and to the kitchen, she realized that Izuku wasn't there either. She was confused for a moment, but then she remembered what day it was. The entrance exam date. Izuku. Huh? It's coming towards you. Get ready. Izuku's eyes widened when he realized that he got distracted. Right. I'll get it, Dad. Good. I would suggest looking up. It'll be down any moment now. Nodding, Izuku turned his head up as he waited for the ball to fall. His father had managed to throw the ball much higher than he could, but that was expected. All Izuku had to do was catch it. They would be in a lot of trouble if he didn't. He saw the yellow round shape just as it was getting closer. Making sure his hands were outstretched, Izuku waited until it was close enough before he reached out. And he caught the yellow beach ball that had seen the orbit. You're nervous, son. Mind telling me why? Hisashi asked. Do you even need to ask why? My exam is today. And if I fail, then I won't be able to become a hero, Izuku said as he tossed the ball back upwards. That's a bit dramatic. There are still other hero schools in Japan, Hisashi pointed out as he kept his eyes on the sky. Not like UA. It's where all the best go to learn. And I want to be one of the best. Like you and All Might. Hisashi smiled at the compliment as he also saw the ball begin to descend. He caught it with much more ease than Izuku. I appreciate you thinking about me that way. But I'm wondering if you're also trying to subtly insult me. What? How? Are you saying that I'm not a good teacher? Have I not prepared you well enough? Hisashi said as he took his turn tossing the ball. What? No. No. That's not what I meant, Dad. It's okay, son. Ball. Izuku recovered quickly enough to make sure the ball didn't fall between them. When he caught it, Hisashi continued. I know how you feel, Izuku. I felt the same way back on Viltrum, back when I signed up for the outreach program. Really? You were nervous? Of course. I was signing up for a program that would require me to leave my home and fly towards a planet I had never even heard of before. And I would be in charge of making sure that the planet was safe and protected. I honestly didn't know what I would find once I was assigned here. I didn't even know what the inhabitants looked like before I came here. Really? And you still came? Yes. I wanted to do my part for Viltrum, and the outreach program is one of the most prestigious routes one can take. And I think I made the right choice, Hisashi said as he looked to the city below them. I was able to become a hero in this world. And I was able to meet your mother. Floating forward, Hisashi stopped and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. And I was able to have you. And none of it would have been possible if I let my fears stop me from expanding. And that's what you need to do, son. Push forward, no matter how hard the path seems. You think you can do that? Izuku took a moment to contemplate. But only a moment. Yeah. I think I can. Izuku's toss had more vigor behind it this time. It took longer for it to fall down and for Hisashi to catch it. There were also a bunch of feathers around it, but both of them decided not to question it. Hisashi instead chose to drill the lesson in further. Son, the people you are going to be tested alongside will have had years to train themselves with their powers. They will be more experienced. But you have one advantage that they don't. What's that? You're my son, Hisashi explained. Being a Viltrumite means that you are the one thing that all those kids think they are. You actually are invincible. That was a word that Izuku never thought would be used to describe him. But here was his father using that exact word without the slightest hesitation. The strongest man in the world was giving him a level of validation he had never received before. Thanks, Dad. Don't just thank me, son. Go out there and prove me right. Both father and son descended back to the ground. Thankfully the ball never fell out of their grips, otherwise they might have needed to pay for property damages. Do you feel ready now, Izuku? The boy nodded. He was ready. Good. Now go and show them what you're worth. Inko had just finished cleaning herself up and had started making breakfast when Hisashi walked back inside. He was wearing normal clothes and holding a newspaper in his arms, so she knew now that he hadn't been out working. Which left one option. Last-minute training. Yes. Just had to drill in some basics before I could send Izuku to the exam. Do you think we will be alright? I'm sure he will, Hisashi waved off as he opened up his paper. He's our son. He'll do great. Oh, and I made sure to tell him to message you when he gets there. Inko did appreciate the sentiment. Still, even as she tried to continue with a normal day, she couldn't hold off the slight doubts that things could go awry. She just had to hope her husband was right. Elsewhere. Yue's entrance was much taller up close than it looked in pictures. Izuku stood at the precipice now. Once he stepped past that gate, it would be up to him to make sure he got in. His father didn't have any way to get him in on recommendations, since his hero work didn't bring him into contact with UA's staff. And with how private of a hero his father was, he didn't have the social pull to get Izuku in easily. Which meant that he was going to have to get in through his own efforts. And he could do it. All those months preparing with his father meant that Izuku had the tools he needed to make it in. He still needed to work on his powers, but his father had already told him that he was ready. And who was he to doubt Omni-Man? And the best way to start was to take his first steps. So once he had sent the message to his mother, he started walking. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Izuku mentally repeated that mantra to himself as he approached the main doors of UA. So long as he continually told himself that he was capable of passing the tests and making it into the school. Out the way. Shitty nerd. Of course. Izuku didn't even bother acknowledging Bakugo as the blonde boy walked past him. He made the choice many months ago to stop letting the old bully get in his way, and he wasn't about to let him stop him now. Even though being ignored did make the explosive boy angry, that didn't stop him from still walking towards the same doors. Izuku just waited until he was gone before resuming. Don't let him get to you, Izuku muttered to himself. Remember who you are. What you are. Izuku started walking again. Only to accidentally step on the back of his other shoe. He didn't fall to the ground. But his body was now floating in the air, his feet suspended as his face gazed downward. He was more annoyed with himself for almost falling than he was nervous right now. I thought I was better than this. Your quick lets you fly. That's so cool. That was a feminine voice. And it seemed to be directed at him. His mind still comprehending the possibility, Izuku turned his head to see a girl with brown hair staring at him. She immediately looked away when she noticed that she was. Sorry. Didn't mean to look at you so long. I just thought I could help when you looked like you might fall, but then you stopped yourself. I thought that was cool, so I said that. The girl tried to explain. She then noticed that Izuku was just blankly looking at her now. Are you okay? Huh? Oh. Yes. I am okay. Izuku promptly placed his feet back on the ground. He tried to make himself look less like a mess. That's good. Well, see you later. The girl ran inside the school, leaving Izuku to realize something. Something that he did not think would happen until his 20s when he was an official hero. I just talked to a girl. Sometime later. The written test wasn't as hard as Izuku had expected it to be. That wasn't to say that it was easy, but Izuku had been expecting a greater challenge. Many of the answers had been fairly easy to figure out. But now, sitting in a massive auditorium along with every other applicant, Izuku was wondering just how helpful the written test would actually be. Good afternoon, potential students. Can I get a hey? Present Mick, the pro hero and presenter for the next part of the exam, did not get a hey. He instead got a bunch of blank stares and white noise. Good enough. He said, trying to keep his own mood light. Now, all of you finished your written tests. It's time to tell you what you'll be doing for the practical. That got some buzz working around with the attendants. They all wanted to know what they would be doing next. And they were eager to get the details. Izuku included. Each and every one of you has a paper under your seats. And each paper has a letter. Feel free to take a look. Each potential student looked where Present Mick had directed them, Izuku included. When the green-haired boy saw his sheet, it read B. The letter represents where each and every one of you will be going for your practice. Each letter is the designation of a different battle center. As for what you will be doing, well. Present Mick pressed a button in his hands, and the screen behind him suddenly showed a presentation. The slide was displaying 4 different types of robots. Inside these centers, you will be facing what UA staff like to refer to as villain bots. The machines you face will be worth 1, 2, and 3 points each. Whoever can garner the most amount of points by the end has the highest chance of making it into this school. Smash robots. That actually sounded easy to do. Izuku wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it had been something along the lines of saving a mannequin from a building or trying to avert a fake disaster. Something that seemed impossible even if it was staged. Maybe he had been spending too much time with his dad. Izuku didn't get to ponder it too much because a tall boy with glasses suddenly stood up. Excuse me, Present Mick. I have a question. What is it? The printout of the sheet mentions there being 4 types of robots, the boy pointed out. He then suddenly looked distraught. Is this a typo? An overlook? Has UA made a mistake? Izuku noticed the same thing that the boy had. But he wasn't sure if it was really a reason to start crying. I'm glad you noticed. You see, the 4th type of robot is a 0-pointer. They're not really worth anything, so I would recommend ignoring those. I see. Thank you for clarifying. The loud boy sat back down, giving Present Mick the chance to give his final words. Alright, that settles that. Everybody get out there. Battle Center B. It didn't look so much like a center as it did like a whole city of its own. An entire city, with buildings and streets laid out for student destruction, was built inside the school grounds just to test potential students. UA really spared no expense when it came to how they conducted their business. Most of the other people he was going to take the test with were also amazed by the sheer size of the place. Their whispers of disbelief and sudden nervousness were easy for Izuku to hear. Which was good, because he had asked his dad, and it turned out that Viltrumites did not have heightened senses. In the corner of his eye, Izuku saw someone that looked somewhat familiar. Moving his body and looking closer, Izuku realized that it was the same girl he had met before walking. A girl whose name he hadn't even learned. Deciding that maybe talking to someone might lessen his own nerves, Izuku walked closer to her. Only to be stopped by the same tall boy in glasses that he had met in the auditorium. "What do you think you're doing?" "Excuse me? I was just going to go and distract that girl and lower her chances of entrance. Do you plan to do the same to everyone else here?" "What?" Izuku was flabbergasted by the boy. Where was he even getting these ideas? "No. I was just going to." "Listen up, people. Time for the summary." Everyone looked up to see President Mick delivering another explanation. This time standing above a watchtower that overlooked the entire entrance and entire fake city. "Rules are simple. Break as many robots as you can in the time provided. The more you smash, the more points you get. Now get going." Every simple applicant was caught off guard by that announcement. The gates were opening, but they were still opening. They had to move now. There are no countdowns in real life. Go. And go they did. Izuku was shocked when he saw every other person taking the test to immediately take off inside the city, leaving him behind all of them. Izuku got nervous, but only for a second. He remembered what he could do and what his father had taught him. Stepping off of the ground, Izuku flew behind the crowd. His fists were clenched as he prepared to attack. It was time for him to get a glimpse of what he could really do. The red cape flapped in the air from high above the school grounds as Omni-Man watched all the events unfold. He was here to check just how well his son's training had prepared him. And to see just what sort of people he would be interacting with for the next couple of years to come. So far, he wasn't all that impressed. The powers he was seeing were basic at best. He saw that one irritating boy Izuku used to talk about, blowing away fragile machines. If his explosions could produce more power, he might actually be interesting. None of the strength quirks he saw was very interesting either. Nothing close to what he and his son could do. So far, nothing that he saw is impression him. But at the same time, it didn't matter to him. He was only there to check on one person. He knew that Izuku was going to pass. It was only a matter now of how much of his power would come out. Entrance exam 2. Hilda had trained his entire for this moment. Actually, he had trained for many moments, but this was one of the bigger ones. He was taking the final and arguably most important part of the entrance exam. The teachers had to be watching, so he needed to impress them. His legs were ready. So were his engines. And there was a robot staring directly at him. "I will not fail. I will become a UA student. I will." "Excuse me." Hilda felt a gush of wind beside him, and then he saw a grey blur rush past him. In the next second, the robot was defeated. It was a pile of scrap and broken metal smashed against the wall of a nearby building, leaving cracks in its concrete as oil splattered all over it. And floating in front of it was the same green-haired boy from before. "Sorry about taking the robot. I saw an opportunity," he said as he sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. "Good luck with the rest of the test though." The boy flew away, leaving a stunned Hilda to quickly recover and try to salvage his moment. He lost one robot. He wasn't going to lose more. "Halt human. Prepare to." The robot never finished its pre-programmed statement. Instead, Izuku flew around it, grabbed one of its arms, spun around in the air for a bit, and tossed the robot onto an empty street. The green machine crashed and rolled on the pavement, losing many limbs and pieces during the fall. When its momentum ran out, only a pile of scrap and oil remained on the concrete. That was a 2-pointer. Good. Izuku had actually expected the test to be harder. All he was doing was flying around a designated area and punching every robot he saw. He occasionally kicked some to add some variety to the mix. It was actually pretty fun when he saw that one robot's head fly and roll away like a ball. Still, it was pretty easy to tear through the robots. He had no issue taking some away from other applicants, but he tried not to do that so much. All these other kids had tried so hard just to get here, and he would feel guilty if he ended up being the reason they didn't get in. So he sometimes let others break robots themselves so they could get some points. But he was willing to help out when someone looked like they needed help. Such as right now. Ah. Why are they so big? That particular scream of terror came from the shortest boy Izuku had ever seen. He looked like a preschooler with grape hair, more than he did an applicant for Japan's best hero course. And based on the fact that he was pressed against the wall on his backside as a robot loomed over him, Izuku wouldn't be surprised if he actually was. Still, it would be cruel to leave the boy the way he was. So Izuku flew over and grabbed the robot by its head. He ascended upwards, taking the now helpless machine with him. "Are you alright?" Opening his eyes, the grape-haired boy was stunned to see someone flying and lifting the three-pointer in the air. None of which seemed to be difficult for him at all. "I saw you in trouble, so I thought I could help," the green-haired boy said. "I'm sorry to ask, but is it okay if I take the points from this robot? I don't want to say that you couldn't do it, but it seemed difficult for you. Is it okay?" The short boy nodded meekly. He didn't think he would get the points anyway. "Thank you." Izuku crushed the robot's head within his hand. The sparks and shrapnel that tore off of its head didn't bother him, not leaving a scratch on any of his fingers. The rest of its body broke off, crashing back into the ground. Izuku quickly dropped the mashed head down with it. "I'm sorry for taking that one from you. But I'm sure you'll find other robots to get some points. Good luck." Izuku flew off, leaving a shocked and despondent young boy to mope. "I'm not going to get into this school, am I? Now how am I going to impress any girls?" Inside a secret room within UA, all of the school staff were watching the different tests as they occurred. Secret cameras were hidden around the facilities so that the upcoming teachers could analyze and validate potential students. Quite a few of them showed potential to be heroes. The boy with tape in his arms would be useful in rescues. The girl with the earphone jacks could use her abilities in a hostage situation. And the boy with the engine calves could be helpful for direct civilian safety. But there were two applicants this year that were impressive to the teacher based purely on power and skill. The first was in Battle Center A. "Not exactly a subtle one, is he?" Cementus noted as he watched a blonde boy blast and tear through every robot in his path. "He's got power. But I think some restraint might be missing," Ectoplasm said with a hint of worry. The boy was easily able to move through the robots, but his explosions were also dangerously close to hitting the other applicants. And when the other kids called him out on it, the boy just got angry at them, yelling at them before moving on his own way. "Seems like a loose cannon. Personally, I like this other kid a bit more." At Power Loader's words, every pair of eyes turned to the other impressive applicant. A green-haired boy was flying around Center B, punching through the robots like they were wet paper. Impressively, he was also helping out the other children in his path, taking out the robots when they seemed intent to hurt them. He couldn't know about the secret point system, which made his actions all the more impressive. Like all the rest of his soon-to-be peers, All Might was impressed and concerned by the green-haired boy he was seeing on the screen. The powers of flight and strength mixed were a rare combination. In fact, he only knew of one other person in Japan with that same set. He had met him a few times. The man kept to himself mostly, but All Might wondered. Who is that boy? He has potential. Blood King Vlad was the one who had asked the question and made that statement, and they were shared by many of his peers. Most of them were interested in the boy, if not outright impressed. "We could use someone like that. Though his power does remind me of someone. Why don't we test him?" The last question came from the smallest living thing in the room. An animal with intelligence beyond human who had a small pendant for sadism. And a large curiosity. "Let's see how this new batch deals with a zero-pointer." Some of the teachers had some concern over Nezu's eagerness to get his machine out, but most were in agreement. They had seen most of what the applicants could do. Now it was time to give the final push. One good shove to see what they would do when pushed. But one person in the background did not share everyone else's sense of adoration. He saw a young man with a lot of power. But power and potential were not the same things. And as his tired eyes watched the screen, he tried to see if the boy had both. "How many points do I have?" Walking on the ground once again, Izuku realized that he had actually surprised himself. Usually, he was so concerned about getting things right that he would become frantic over every little detail. But this part of the test was easy. Really easy. All he had done was reel a few machines and keep a few people from getting crushed. Why was he even worried before? Out. Run. Turning around, Izuku realized that a lot of people were suddenly running away from the center of the fake city. Which didn't really make sense. There wouldn't be many robots left on that side. Would there? Curious, Izuku tried to find someone he could ask. He recognized one person that was also running. The tall boy with glasses. Izuku quickly flew over to him and tapped him on the shoulder. Momentarily surprised, the boy jumped. "Sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. I just saw you running away, along with everyone else." "But why is everyone running?" "Our own safety," the boy responded quickly. "I suggest you do the same." "Safety? From what?" Boom. The building that was right next to the crumbled apart. And from the dusk rose an even larger robot. "Oh." That danger. I suggest you start running. We may be able to find some more points at. I'm going to hit it. Hilda stared at the boy in front of him like he was a madman. Did he just say what Tenya thought he heard? Hit it? This isn't like the regular robots. It's not even worth any points. I know that. I just want to hit it, Izuku said. He had spent the entire day getting rid of easy robots. He had been bored. I think it might be a challenge. Izuku quickly took off to the sky, leaving a dumbfounded Hilda on the ground. Is he really trying to be a hero? Hilda wondered. He seems like he would prefer to just punch things. Turning to run away, Hilda stopped when something flashed through his leg. He didn't see what it was, but it made his left knee buckle. And he crumbled to the ground because of it. He tried to get up, but moving his leg hurt too much for some reason. Looking back, Hilda saw the cause of the pain. A stray rock of concrete that had broken off of the building the zero-pointer had destroyed. One the size of a cabbage. And one strong to make him unable to move. That's when Hilda heard the other voice. This one was feminine. Do you need help? Unaware of Hilda's thoughts about him, Izuku rose until he was level with the robot's face. He could see its massive red eye just ahead of him. All of humanity must die. All humans will suffer. Wow. Whoever made you must have had issues. Izuku flew around the robot, trying to find the best way to hit it. He wanted to know if he could bring it down in one hit. Side of the head might let it stay up. I don't think hitting its chin will do anything. So it looks like. Izuku floated back to build some space. The more momentum he could build, the better. He kept his right fist ready since it was his dominant hand. He took a deep breath to steady himself, just like his father had taught him. And once the robot faced him directly, his opening was made. You will not win, human. Robots will. Boom. Izuku blasted himself forward, staring the robot directly in the eye. The same eye that he punched his way inside of. Only a few seconds later, the same fist punched its way out the other side of the zero-pointer's head. Any machinery inside the mech's head was either compromised or destroyed, and that meant that it wouldn't be standing for long. That was easy. I wonder why. Izuku saw the zero-pointer falling. He saw its shadow looming over the fall streets. He saw the colorful shapes being covered by that shadow. He also saw the faces connected to those shapes. A girl trying to carry a boy. Crap. Flying quickly, Izuku ducked under the zero-pointer. It didn't take long for him to reach the two. Sorry about this. Hang on. Not waiting for a response or consent, Izuku picked both the girl and the boy up and carried them away from the falling robot. He was easily able to fly them away. And when the dust of the collapsing machine settled, as well as the test being declared over, Izuku let them down. Are you both alright? The boy didn't respond. He didn't even look at Izuku. But the girl was happy to answer. Thank you. I thought that robot was going to crush us. But you flew up there and punched it in the face. The girl's singing motions made it clear that she had enjoyed seeing that. I knew you could float, but I didn't think you could fly that high. How did you do it? My dad taught me, Izuku said honestly. Really? Is he a hero? Yeah. He's actually. Oh, dear. That looks like it hurt. Both Izuku and the girl next to him saw a small old woman walking up to them. More specifically, up to the boy with glasses. Oh, that is a bad injury, dearie. You shouldn't really walk with it, she said as she got closer to the injury. Then she kissed it. Izuku and the girl were confused for a moment, but when they saw the light coming off of the injury and the bruise began to fade, Izuku realized what was happening. Your recovery, girl. Correct, dearie. Now, why don't you all get moving? The test is over, and I'm sure someone will want to clean up this mess. She eyed Izuku for a moment before she walked away. The boy with glasses, his leg now fine, walked away as well. He didn't bother to say anything. Instead, the girl leaned over to Izuku. My name is Uraraka. Echako Uraraka. Izuku Midoriya. Once the introductions were out of the way, the two of them made their way outside the fake city. And the two of them went their separate ways. It was only until later that Izuku asked himself a question. Wait, should I have asked for her number? Elsewhere, above UA. Not too bad. Not too great either, but Omni-Man could work with what he saw. Izuku's flight patterns were erratic and his fighting was a little chaotic, but it was something that couldn't be polished. His instinct to save those other children would be useful as a hero, but he would need to learn to rein in that urge. Couldn't have it getting in the way of his improvement. He just needed some more lessons in control. And with some good exercise, his strength and speed would increase to levels that would put every child in the school in the dust. If they didn't let him into their school after today, then UA had lost their touch. And Izuku could do better. Flying away, Omni-Man sought out work for himself. Izuku could worry about school. Omni-Man had a job to get back to. Weeks later. Relax, son. They said it would take a while. It's been weeks, Dad. What if I don't hear back? That means I didn't get in. Obviously. Well, either that or they need to fix their mailing system. That's not helping, Dad, Izuku mumbled as he laid his head on the table. Inko was out getting the mail, and Hisashi was busy reading his paper while trying to keep his son's anxiety in check. He really needed to work on helping his son get over it. Izuku, why wouldn't they want you? You said yourself that breaking their machines and passing their test was easy. Or was that a lie? No, that was true. I'm getting impatient, I guess. The more I wait, the less sure I am. Did you ever feel that way? Hisashi chuckled as he recalled the last time he had felt a small amount of fear. It had been years since then. I had to take a test to join the outreach program. I've told you that. But I probably should have mentioned the waiting time before I got my results. You didn't get it immediately? No. In fact, well, it shames me to admit it, I wasn't anyone's first choice for the program. Seriously? Izuku had a hard time believing that. His father was Omni-Man. Why wouldn't they let him into their most prestigious work? It's true. On Viltrum, outreach work is reserved for our best and brightest. Only those that truly represent our values are allowed to venture into the galaxy and spread our ways. I had to fight and work hard to prove that I was worthy. But the legislators had a lot of applicants to sort through, and I wasn't sure I made it. Waiting for weeks was nerve-wracking. But you got in. Hisashi smiled and nodded. I got in. My patience paid off just like my hard work. And I'm sure it'll be the same for you, Izuku. You just need. Slam. The front door suddenly crashed open, and Inko was seemingly out of breath. Hisashi immediately stood up when he saw his wife. Inko, what's wrong? Did someone chase you? What? No. It's nothing like that, Hisashi. It's just Inko held out her hand. One with a wide envelope. Izuku's letter got here. Eyes wide, Izuku jumped out of his chair and flew to his mother. What does it say? Did you read it? Did I? Calm down. Hisashi grabbed Izuku by his shirt and pulled him back to earth. He then took the letter from Inko and handed it to Izuku. Go and read it in your room. We'll be out here if you want to talk. Dad? Hisashi, I wanted all of us to read it together. Inko, it's a personal thing. He needs to face this on his own first. Inko wanted to argue, but Izuku had already taken the letter into his room. And Hisashi was sitting back at the table, opening up his newspaper again. Shouldn't we be with him, Hisashi? What happens if he doesn't get in? Then UA wasn't worth his time. We'll find a better hero school for him, Hisashi said without hesitation. But he needs to face the truth himself first. He worked hard to try and get in, now he needs to see if it paid off. Besides, we'll be right out here if he needs us. Inko wasn't too happy with the arrangement, but she understood where Hisashi was coming from. He had told her his own experiences with needing to wait for an answer. So all they could do was wait. But waiting was difficult for Inko, for whom every minute passing felt like an hour. Hisashi wasn't bothered though. He never seemed bothered by having to wait. Inko sometimes wondered if he was actually that patient or if his people just viewed time differently than humans did. She should ask him about that. But her musing was interrupted when Izuku finally walked out of his room. His head was held low, his hair covering his eyes. His mouth kept as a straight line. She couldn't see his expression. Izuku? What happened? Izuku lifted his head. Tears were streaming from his eyes as he bit his lip. Tears of joy as he tried to contain his joyous smile. I got in. Oh, Izuku. I'm so proud of you. Inko hugged her son, who happily enveloped his mother. I told you you'd get in, Hisashi said as he looked across from his newspaper. Never had any doubt. Letting go of his mother, Izuku flew over and trapped his father in a hug. One that wasn't expected, causing Hisashi to nearly jump. Izuku. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dad. Izuku was crying into his father's shoulder, not bothering to let go. I could never have done this without you. Hisashi wasn't sure how to respond. This was new to him. He had hugged his wife before, but that was different. He had never been hugged by a child like this, not even his own. Not like this. But it felt right. It felt good. And with Inko smiling encouragement at him, he returned the hug. I know you could do it, son. I just helped you. Thank you. I can be a hero because of you. The more Izuku hugged his father, the more hopeful he felt about the future to come. He finally had hope and a method to become the hero he always wanted to be. His dream was about to come true. You need to pick a new successor soon, All Might. You don't have as much time as you think. If there was one thing Toshinori Yagi, the hero known as All Might, wasn't good at, it was listening to the advice of others. He knew that he could be stubborn, and it was the reason he tended to get in trouble. Whenever he had a gut feeling, he followed through on it. And right now, his gut was telling him that he needed to wait. I know that but I need to wait. I need a proper successor. And that is what I am offering you. Why won't you at least listen to me about that? I hate to say it like this, Night Eye. I really do. But this is a decision reserved only for one for all users, All Might explained. We are the ones who hold the power for years on end. We are the ones that have to deal with its consequences. And only we can decide who has to carry the burden after us. Is that really your excuse? Why don't you just say that my opinion doesn't matter to you? What? No. That is not what I am trying to say at all. I swear. You're only backtracking because you think I'm offended. But All Might, I understand that I am not at your level. That isn't the issue. Night Eye. I know that our argument soured our relationship. But I thought that maybe at least. Mirai. Listen to me, All Might forcefully said. The use of Night Eye's given name was enough to shut him up. I do value your opinion. And if you think that this candidate of yours is worthy, I will meet with him. But I took up a teaching position at UA, many aspiring heroes will be there and I intend to do some scouting there. That was a surprise for Night Eye. Not just the use of his own personal name, but also the fact that All Might was going to be a teacher. He had no doubt his idol could learn the craft, but he had his concerns. Are you certain of this, All Might? You've never taught anyone before. No, I haven't. But I have had mentors of my own. I can look back on them. And I have other teachers at UA to learn from as well. I'm certain that I can figure this out. He actually wasn't. But he wasn't about to admit that. Alright. Just know that my offer stands. I'll be in touch. After hanging up, All Might allowed himself to smile lightly. His relationship with his old sidekick had not been the best since All for One's defeat many years ago. But maybe things could improve on that end. After hanging up on All Might, Night Eye turned his attention to the news. There was another popular hero still making headlines. Just 2 days ago, the reclusive hero Omni-Man was seen helping fellow hero gang Orca deal with a giant whale villain near Dagoba Beach. While Omni-Man has dealt with monsters in the past, they have all been of a higher caliber. Leading many to wonder he has suddenly turned his attention to what are smaller threats by comparison. Omni-Man did not stay for comment, leaving many to speculate. Night Eye was speculating on his own. He did not know Omni-Man personally. He had never met the man, only seen his work. While he was good enough at his job to deserve being called a hero, he certainly didn't have the spirit of one. Not like All Might did. Omni-Man worked exclusively on the giant monster and natural disaster jobs. With his massive strength, speed, and flight quirks, nothing else posed a challenge for him. He even remembered All Might joke once that he would be nervous to fight him. To this day, Night Eye wasn't sure if he had been joking. These facts did make his sudden change in stopping smaller crimes unusual. Not necessarily bad, as he was being very helpful in stopping villains from causing more havoc, but still unusual. He had never shown any interest in addressing smaller crimes and incidents. He only ever showed up when the world seemed about to end. So why the sudden change? Night Eye had a few ideas. But they were ideas that he couldn't test without actually meeting Omni-Man. And that seemed even more impossible a task as becoming All Might's sidekick. At least with All Might, he was so popular that it was relatively easy to find his location and pester him for the position. But Omni-Man was in a unique position. Technically, he was one of the most popular heroes in the world. His striking costume was plastered on magazines and posters worldwide. His name was known by everyone, even people who didn't like heroes all that much. His real name was not as renowned. It wasn't even known to the rest of the hero community. Night Eye had even asked All Might, who didn't give him an answer. And that was just his name. His personal life, things like family, hobbies, and ideals, were all completely unknown to the general public. Even other heroes couldn't claim to know Omni-Man that well. If at all. For someone so powerful and well-known, he was also very secretive and private. So why was he suddenly making more appearances? That's when his door opened. And Bubble Girl walked in. Sir, we found a lead. The Yakuza lead you were looking for. Nodding, Night Eye dismissed his sidekick. It seemed that his private musings would have to wait. He had an old case to try and finally finish. Elsewhere. Izuku looked in the mirror at his new uniform. His new UA uniform. A uniform from UA that was his. It was a knock at the door that brought him back down to earth. Izuku. Are you alright in there, sweetie? Shaking his head, Izuku gathered his thoughts, picked up his backpack, and stepped outside his door. His mom was waiting for him. Oh. You look so handsome, Izuku. Inko practically choked her son as she squeezed him so tightly. Does he now? Hisashi said as he entered the room. He took a moment to analyze Izuku, his gray eyes studying his current state. Not bad. But this needs to improve. Izuku frowned. What is it? I did the best I could, but… I know ties are an earth tradition, but even I can do better than this, Hisashi said as he took the red fabric off of Izuku's neck and rearranged it. He looped it in ways Izuku couldn't grasp, ironed it flat as he did so. There we go. much better. Izuku looked in the mirror to see his father was right. You need to teach me how to do that. Later. After you come back from school. And after we do our own training. Alright. Oh, right. I need to get going. Izuku nearly flew out of the house before his mom grabbed his collar. No flying outside, Izuku. And are you sure you have everything? Yes, Mom. Do you have your textbooks and notebooks? I stocked last night. What about your ID and your identification? Will they still let you in? They should, Izuku said with less certainty. What about Inko? Stopped when Hisashi placed a hand on her shoulder. Inko, I'm sure today will be fine. Today's his first day and he can improve from here if he needs to. Hisashi eyed his son. You are ready, aren't you? Izuku took a breath. I'm nervous. But I think I am ready. You helped me train for this. Hisashi smiled. I only gave directions. You took action. Now go show those kids what you can do. I will. I love you guys. I'll see you later. Izuku quickly raced to the door and ran outside the house. He would be at UA in no time. Provided no officers stopped him for public quirk usage. Standing at the door, both Inko and Hisashi watched as their son made his way to his new school. Once Izuku was out of sight, Hisashi grinned at his wife. You know, Izuku is going to be gone for a while. Inko knew where her husband was going with this. But she could have her own fun too. You're right. I really should get everything ready. I'm sorry. Izuku will doubtless be hungry when he comes back. And the house could stand to be cleaner while he's gone. You could help me with that, can't you, honey? Well, I can, Hisashi said uncertainly. He hadn't intended for this to occur, but he was willing to help his wife. Even if his personal preferences were elsewhere. Good. I'll get a mop for you. Yeah. Wait for it. Inko walked a few steps away before she spoke again. Hisashi. Once we're done cleaning. We can do something else. Something you might enjoy. Hisashi quickly closed the door and got to work. I keep forgetting that people with giant quirks exist. That was Izuku's first thought when he made it to the door for the Wanna classroom. The door was at least twice his size, maybe thrice. Definitely for people much larger than him. He might even have some in his class. Okay. Just remember what Dad said. Be yourself, be confident, and don't let yourself be intimidated. Izuku was already failing the last two. His nerves were making him shake and was already intimidated without having to meet any of his classmates yet. They all managed to make it into UA. Which meant that they had to have great quirks. Nothing like him and his dad, but definitely powerful enough to be in the same school as All Might. People that he would have to compete against. It's you. Midoriya. Huh? Turning around, Izuku was greeted by a girl with brown hair and a bright smile. Two things he remembered seeing back at the entrance exam. Uraraka. You're in Wanna too. Yeah. That's great. We're going to be classmates. Smiling, Izuku could feel his anxieties begin to wash away. He didn't know who else was going to be in the room. But at least there was one familiar friendly face he did know. Well, why don't we go in? After you, Uraraka said with an exaggerated gesture. Smiling, Izuku opened the door. Desks are not meant for feet. How many times must I tell you? Why don't you just shut up, you four-eyed nerd? There was only one person that would say the word nerd with such anger and disgust. A person that Izuku knew all too well. Itsuki. Intrigued and somewhat concerned, Achako leaned closer to Izuku. Do you know him? You two are late. Ah. Izuku and Achako both exclaimed at the voice that suddenly appeared behind them. They were even more surprised when they saw a tired face appearing out of a yellow sleeping bag on the floor. How can you be heroes if you aren't punctual? Go to your seats. Both Izuku and Achako had many questions, but they didn't know if this was a good time to ask. So they went to their seats and waited to see what would happen. As he sat down, Izuku looked across to the other students in the class. There was a boy with split red and white hair and a scarred eye. A girl with earphones jacks for ears. A boy with purple hair, one that looked like he needed sleep. And a lot of other interesting characters Izuku would be spending the year with. He couldn't focus on any of them because the same man from the sleeping bag was now standing on the desk in front of the class. And all he did was stand there. Stand and stare at them with reddening eyes that looked like they needed drops. The rest of his face was equally passive and tired, not given any discernible emotion aside from possibly boredom. The class was a little uncomfortable. Was this supposed to be their teacher? If so, what exactly was he doing? I have no idea how we are going to work with this, but we'll see. If the students had been confused before, doubly so now. What was he talking about? He offered no answer, only reaching under his desk and pulling out what seemed to be a uniform. My name is Izawa. And all of you have uniforms like this one under your desks. Please change into them and go outside. I'll be waiting." And with that, he walked outside. No additional explanation, no clarification as to what he wanted. Bakugo spoke out. "What the hell was that all about?" "Language." Genus didn't particularly like snakes. Or any reptiles for that matter. He preferred a smooth complexion. Something easy on the eyes and reassuring. Reptiles had too many scales and could be a little too ugly for his liking. There were a few exceptions to his distaste, but not many. Just like this giant snake villain in front of him. "Out of my way, heroes. I'm going to slither right past all of you." A giant green snake the size of a car. Wearing a yellow t-shirt that had no arms in its sleeves. It was actually a little sad to look at. What wasn't sad was the fact that the snake had just burst headfirst through a shop window, a bag of valuables hanging onto its tail. "I need to stop this soon," Genus said as he held out his hand. A trail of fabric strings shot out towards the villain, hoping to ensnare him. But the snake was crafty. His scaly and slippery body slid right through all of the denim loops. "Nice try, hero. You won't catch me today." The snake hackled as he tried to make his way to the other side of the street. If could slip away, he might be able to. "My turn." Huh? Suddenly, a giant taloned foot came crashing down on the snake villain, gripping it by the neck. A giant gray-scaled reptile with wings stood above the villain, its foot keeping it down. "I got your message, Genus," Ryukyu, the dragon hero, said. "Seems I'm just in time." "Thank you, Ryukyu. It seems we can finally take this thief into custody," Genus said with a sense of relief. He was glad to be done with one job for the day. But the laughter of a snake dashed his hopes. "You both forgot how slippery I am, didn't you?" The giant snake villain twisted its body, sliding right through Ryukyu's grip. Try as she might to close her talon further and keep the thief, she wasn't able to recapture the villain. A villain that would be able to escape. The snake villain took a turn at the street, intending to find an alley or open sewer cover to slide into. The heroes would never find it then. Haha. So long, heroes, you won't. The snake stopped when he crashed into something. Something that his head hit. Something strong enough to make it fall back in pain. But just. The question died when he saw the OA red symbol adorning a strong chest. And a bearded face that looked at him in amusement. "Oh." Smirking, Omni-Man reared back his fist before punching the snake thief directly in the snout. The force of the impact was strong enough to launch the snake's body to the other side of the street, making him crash into a car. The snake's boneless body became limp, no longer capable of moving. And the bag of goods on its tail fell off, free for Omni-Man to pick up. He did so just as Best Jeanist and Ryukyu, now in human form, came up to him. "Omni-Man. Why are you here?" Jeanist asked. Ryukyu shared the same question. Omni-Man, unexpectedly, just shrugged. "I was flying around. I've been feeling pretty good today, so I thought I would help out." Not an answer they were expecting, but not one that they could refuse. A little help was always welcome. "We appreciate the help," Ryukyu said. "My pleasure. I'll leave you to it then." Omni-Man took off like a rocket. His speeds were something Ryukyu could never hope to reach. So she focused on helping Jeanist get the snake villain squared away. Too far away for anyone to look up, Omni-Man took a moment to look down. Best Jeanist and Ryukyu. Two of the best heroes in Japan. So well known and respected as to be regarded in the top 10 of heroes. And there was also a snake villain. An uninspiring thief that the two had struggled to catch until he came along. Shaking his head, Omni-Man decided to head back home. Izuku wouldn't be home for a few more hours. Maybe he could convince Inko to spend some more time together. Elsewhere, at UA. Oh, and before I forget, the person who gets the lowest amount of points will be expelled immediately. The announcement was met with a second of stunned silence. Followed immediately by a unanimous exclamation. "What? If you can't pass the simplest of beginners' tests, then you have no business being at this school." But this is our first day." Achako begged. "I know. Better to weed out those with no potential from the start," Azawa said completely calmly as he pulled up a hologram with different scores. "These are the scores of the entrance exam. I want all of you to take a look." It was the list of the top 10 highest scores from the exam. A reading that listed as Izuku Midoriya, Bakugo Katsuki, Ijiro Kirishima, Ibara Shiozaki, Itsuka Kendo, Tenyu Ilda, Tetsu Fumikage Tokoyami, Yasetsu Awase, and Achako Uraraka. A lot of eyes fell upon Izuku once the list was read. Most were impressed, some curious. Izuku himself was unsure of how to deal with the fact that he got first place, his nerves flip-flopping between fear and pride. Staring at him from the back, Katsuki was trying to decide if life in prison was worth this murder. He knew that it wasn't, but it was getting very tempting. "Midoriya," Azawa called out, getting everyone's attention. "Since you came in first, you go first." He then pulled a baseball out of his pocket. He tossed at Midoriya and he then pointed at a small white circle in the field. Just stand in there and throw it. But I want you to use your quirk while you do it. Izuku's eyes widened. You want me to use my POW quirk? Most school examinations focus on keeping kids quirkless in tests like these. It's illogical, prevents teachers from really knowing the potential of their students. Or lack thereof. So I want you to throw the ball as far as you can. Understanding, Izuku walked and stood in the middle of the white circle. He was about to throw in when he got an idea. Mr. Izawa. Is it okay if I throw it in the air? I might get it further that way. A lot of the students were intrigued when they heard him say that. Achako and Ilda already knew about his ability to fly, but no one else thought he was going to float or jump in the air and throw the ball. Bakugo certainly didn't know about Izuku's ability. He just thought that Izuku was strong all of a sudden. As for Izawa himself, he did raise a brow but ultimately nodded. I want to see what your best is. If being in the air is your best, then go ahead. Thank you. Izuku quickly took off into the air while staying in viewing range of Izawa and the other students. Many of whom had widened eyes as a result of seeing him fly so easily. The exceptions being Izawa, who could not care less. And Bakugo, whose eyes were widened in rage rather than awe. Taking a moment to feel the ball in his hand, Izuku waited for just a moment before throwing it. When he did, he waited. Midoriya, why are you still up there? I only needed you to throw the ball. I know that, Mr. Izawa. I'm just waiting. Waiting for what? It's almost here. It only took a few seconds after Izuku said that. That's when a small white object came barreling towards him through the air. A baseball that was still intact. One that Izuku caught in his hands easily. Holding the smoking sphere in his hands, Izuku descended back to the earth. When he looked at Izawa, the older man was reading the distance. Which he then showed to the class. 24,901 miles. That was the circumference of the earth itself. And that was the distance that the ball traveled when Izuku threw it. That was the distance it had covered in just one throw. What? Every other student in Wano was astounded by what they had just seen. They would never have believed it if they weren't seeing it with their own eyes. A ball was thrown across the earth. How did you do that? Dude, that is so manly. That shouldn't be possible. Deku? A slight yelp escaped Izuku when he heard that shout from a voice he recognized. Not a yelp of fear, but of surprise. How the hell did you get quirks? Did you steal them? Steal them? What are you talking about, Kitsuki? Don't play dumb with me. Bakugo shouted as sparks were flying in his hands. I swear I am going to arg. Bakugo stopped when a series of bandages wrapped themselves across his body, effectively keeping him in place. If you want to fight, save it for the villains you might face one day, Izawa warned. Hurt the students and you're out of this school immediately. Understood. Bakugo understood the words, but he might not comply. Izuku could tell that just by looking into his deranged eyes. But the blonde boy still nodded, making Izawa release him. Whether it was genuine or not, Izawa didn't care. He knew that he was more than capable of dealing with one egotistical pyromaniac. As Bakugo walked away, Izuku could still feel the lingering hatred. But he wasn't as afraid as he might have been before. There are still more tests to complete. Everyone get in line. This is where I will be stopping for now. As someone who is recently reading the Invincible comics, I can't believe I never paid attention before to how energetic Viltrumites could be. Especially pure-blooded ones like Nolan, since he and Debbie would very often make use of their free time together. Hence why Hisashi enjoys it when Izuku leaves the house. Anyway, the next chapter will likely focus on characters other than Izuku and 1A. The reason being that, as others have noted, there hasn't been too much of a display as to how this world mixes invincible concepts with MHA ones. So the next chapter will be all of that. Along with some Omni-Man stuff.